Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for attending today's session. We're just going to wait a couple more minutes just in case we have any later attendees arrive, and then we'll make a start on this session, which will be covering recording and analysing data within BehaviourWatch. And just a reminder, there will be the opportunity to ask questions throughout this webinar, and my colleague will be in that question box, able to help answer those for you. Okay, so I think we'll make a start. So thank you once again for taking the time to join this session. What we'll be doing today is just taking you through some of the basics on how to record information within BehaviourWatch and how to analyze some of the information you've been recording through use of some of our behavior reports. So some of the reports that we'll be covering in this session, in addition to just how to record a slip, just for anybody who just needs a bit of a reminder on how to do so, is we'll be looking at some of the more universally applicable reports. So those are things like your group reports, if you would like to get bar charts and pie charts of information, the behavior radar, if you're looking more towards getting heat maps of your information, chronology, which will show you just a list of records that have been filled in on your system over time in chronological order, as the name would suggest. And then the duration report, which some of you may not be familiar with, but is quite a useful report that allows you to analyze, provided you're capturing the information within the slip itself, how much time is being spent dealing with incidents for individual students, individual occasions, as a result of all of that student's occasions, and then just as a whole school total. So again, just some of those reports that are going to be universally applicable to basically any user of the system. So in order to help demonstrate, I'm going to jump over to our demo system, and the slip we'll be using today to analyze our behavior is the serious incident slip. So if we click on the tab serious incident, there we go. That's going to take us into that particular record type. And you'll see your record types are broken down into individual tabs along the top of your BehaviourWatch system. You would just click the relevant tab for the type of record you need to complete. Now, obviously, we're using a demo system today, so the actual tabs that you have available on your system may well vary. What will be the same is the information that is displayed below the tab itself. So this will just give you some basic columns of information pertaining to the contents of that record. So things like which student has that record been filled in for, the name of the record itself, the occurred date that took place, and then things such as the period, the subject, and a brief description box, which will just contain a little bit of information from the description box at the top of the form, which we'll look at in a moment. You may also, depending on your setup, notice some icons next to the slip name here. So here you can see we have an E and we have a padlock symbol. So the E represents an escalated slip. So one of the processes we can put in place for you is to allow certain slips, when created, to automatically create other slips. So for instance, we might have had a tick box in a separate slip to the serious incident that when ticked would automatically create a serious incident upon being saved. We call that an escalated slip, and those slips are indicated by the E symbol to the right of the slip name. The padlock symbol just suggests that there has been a detention set within that slip. Okay. You'll also notice that some of these are in bold and some of these are in regular text. Anything that is in bold is something that you have not created yourself and you have not edited in any way. So any slips that were created by you or you have edited will no longer display in bold for you. What you will also have, regardless of slip type, is the filter button in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. And this filter screen is exactly the same pretty much everywhere you will find it on the system. The only thing that will be different is that some of the drop-downs will be switched on or off depending on how important they are with that particular report. And this just lets you narrow down or expand further the results that you're displaying. So on the previous screen, if we just cancel a second and go back, you'll see here that we've got 37 records displaying on the screen. This screen will only show you the last 50 records in chronological order by default, but if you do click that filter button, then the show top drop down along here will let you search for more records than just the last 50. You also have things such as the for drop down that are going to let you search for a specific time frame of records to retrieve. So for example, you might want to get records from last academic year or from a very specific date range that you wish to custom set yourself. This filter screen just lets you do that. And again, you have options for narrowing down to individual year groups or to a particular subject that has been recorded within each of those incidents. So once you've set your filters, the screen would then change accordingly to just return the results that you have searched for. To complete an incident slip, in this case, all we do is click Complete Serious Incident in the bottom left-hand corner, and that's going to take you into the form itself. This top section, what we call the slip section, is going to be pretty much the same regardless of whatever slip type you're filling in. We just might have some fewer drop-down options available to you in that slip, again, depending on how relevant those drop-down options are to that slip. What you will almost always find, with a few exceptions, are your student drop-down, so you can specify who you want to complete a slip for. Some slips may display a green or a red plus button. That just simply lets you add multiple quote-unquote perpetrators to that incident, with the red plus button just allowing you to add multiple people in one go, up to a maximum of 40, that's 40. So if we just cancel that a moment. If you do save a slip with multiple perpetrators or multiple victims or staff victims, when you save and close that record, it's just important to be aware that the system will create a separate entry for every combination of those three parties. When it comes to actually reporting on that data, there are ways, and I'll show you those during this session, that you can kind of combine those again into a single figure. But just don't panic if you've created one record and you've got suddenly 5 different slips have all been created at the same time. So then we've added our student. The staff dropdown will default to your own name as the person who is logged in at the time. And the victim dropdown will contain a list of student victims. And then just jumping ahead slightly, the staff victim dropdown contains a list of your staff victims. The description box can be used to just type in your own words a brief description of the incident. The first kind of line of that text is what will show on the previous screen under one of those columns as we just saw. Subject, fairly self-explanatory really, what subject was taking place during the incident. And you can custom build your own subjects into the system, and whatever subjects you have placed into BehaviourWatch will show up in this drop-down for you. Likewise, with location, this is just a list of locations around your site. And again, that's pulled directly from the list that you set up within your admin area. You can also type into these boxes. So if you're looking for A20, you don't have to scroll up and down. In this case, you can just type A20 and it will return the results for you. Date, period, and time, again, fairly self-explanatory, just when it took place. And you can backdate these as well. So if something happens right at the end of the day, you can say this took place on the 21st of February, and we might say that took place at period 4. The time drop down will then flick to the first minute of period 4 for you. And again, if we change this to 11:45 p.m., it's going to change the period to the period that encompasses that time for you. When you save the record, The selections you make here are the ones that will be drawn through into the reports, and you'll just get an additional line of text just below this date that will give you the actual create date and time of that record for the purposes of your own audit. You can also CC to inform others. So if you wanted to manually inform other users of the system of an incident that's taken place, you can just tick their name, click select, and then when you save the record, that will drop an email to those users, which contains a brief breakdown of the incident itself, and then a link they can follow to come into the system to read the details of the incident and maybe to add their own input as well. The only other thing that will appear in this top section that doesn't appear initially is what we call the commentary. That's the ongoing audit trail for your slip. So anybody comes in after that slip was initially created, the commentary is going to capture who made that change, the date and time that change was made, and then the nature of the change itself. You can also leave custom comments in there as well if you want to. So that top section, it kind of comes preloaded really. So again, you're probably not going to find more information in there, but you might find less information depending on your slip. As we come lower down, this is where we get into the more custom elements of the slip itself. So these are the bits that we would build with you. So in this slip, the first thing we record is antecedents, and we do that through a series of tick boxes. And these are not mutually exclusive, so you can tick as many or as few of these as you need to. And you can do similar things for the actual type of behavior as well. And then as we scroll down, you'll see here, for example, if I tick sustained/serious bullying, some slips might have what we call triggered sections. So those are sections that only appear when other relevant information is ticked within the slip first. Usually we do that just as a way to save some vertical space for you, or just to make it simpler for users to understand when they need to actually fill things in. So you would just tick the relevant information within those sections too. You also have the option, that, again, depending on your slip, to set detentions, and we can set automatic detentions or manual detentions. Now, there are some variations there, but as a general rule, automatic detentions, when selected, you will not be able to change the time, location, or duration of those detentions, and manual detentions, you'll be able to change all of those things. With automatic detentions, they would usually just automatically reschedule if a student has been marked as absent or truanted, and it will just automatically reschedule for the next available date for you. Whereas with manual detentions, you get to choose the date that you want them to sit that detention instead. Okay. And then just looking a little bit further down this slip, you have the option for more specific detention types. So you can use break detentions, lunch detentions, after school detentions as well. Again, those will be set up according to your specific needs. You can also capture things like physical intervention information within here. You have the options to record things like body maps within here as well. For today's session, what we're going to do is we're just going to fill in a duration. So we're going to say this took place from 5 p.m. until 5:07 p.m. And again, within your slips, you've got the options as well as your recording of physical interventions and positive handling to be able to record the type of hold used, how long that hold was used for, and which staff members. You have the option to record things like exclusion data as well. Okay. And again, the contents will vary, but once you have filled in the relevant information within your slip, all you need to do is click Save and Close in the bottom right-hand corner, and that slip will then be stored on the system for you, and it becomes immediately reportable. Okay, so that's roughly how to fill in a slip. Now let's take a look at some of the different reports that you can use to actually analyze the data you've captured. So the reports are all kept within the reports area at the top of the page, and the default tab you will normally be taken to is just the behavior reports. So like I say, the reports that we're going to look at in this session are your group report, your behavior radar, your chronology report, and then the duration report. So if we start with group report, so we click group report, and this is going to take us into just the default report that is returned every time you load up group report, that being all of your slips broken down by form group as a pie chart. So the first thing we're going to do is click filter, and I'm going to set this to only look at our serious incident slips. And I'm going to keep it just for the whole academic year, just for now, so we've got a nice range of data to work from. But as you saw previously when we were looking at how to complete a slip, you can use the filter screen to narrow down the set of data you want to include accordingly. So we'll click go. And then what we can do is we can change that from a pie chart And on the right-hand side, you'll get your counts and percentages of how many slips have been contributed by each of the groups within the selections you've made. We can change that from a pie chart to a bar chart if that's slightly easier to interpret the data. And then you will use the by drop-down to break down the data however you want to. So like I say, by default, that will be by form group, but you could do that by, let's say, day of the week. So that might help you identify if there is a particular day of the week where you're having more difficulty with challenging incidents than other days of the week. You can also do that by things like individual student to see if there are any outliers in terms of who is contributing the highest number of incidents to your system within a given time frame. And then if you scroll down a little bit further, you'll also get the option to break things down by, let's say, incident. So is there a particular type of incident that is occurring on the system more frequently than others? And again, when we looked at the slip earlier, you saw we could capture things like antecedents and consequences. You can break down the data by that as well. So you're really just choosing how you want to analyze your information. Okay. So what we can also do in this report is we can use what we call the compare mode. So this lets you basically split your filter into two filters. And then what we can do is we can change our B filter, instead of looking at the current academic year, to look at the previous academic year. And then when we click go, that's going to cross-reference the two sets of data for us. So we can see if there are more instances of a certain type of incident, in this case, this academic year, as compared to last academic year. Okay, and you'll have your key along the side and underneath the report to show you what the different columns represent. And again, you can do this for all manner of different things. So we could do that by month. So is there a particular month that stands out across the two academic years as having more incidents than others? Okay. So you can export and print this report. Depending on the report itself, those buttons will do different things. So in the group report, the printout will just give you just a printout of the data as it's displayed in front of you. But the export button will actually allow you to export the graph that you are seeing in front of you to an image file. So you can right click Save As to add that to a PowerPoint or to a Word document if you need to kind of build your own custom reports outside of BehaviourWatch. That will allow you to get that data out of the system. And as I'm sure you'll come to see as we go through the reports, they're fairly straightforward to use. It's just a case of choosing how you want to break down that data. If you are using a point system, then you do have the option within the show dropdown to, instead of looking by slip distribution, look by point distribution instead. So if I switch off compare mode, one of the other filters, just to be aware of, just jumping back to when we were talking about filling in a slip, is the show dropdown. So if you recall earlier, we discussed that when you have multiple perpetrators, or if you have a variety of perpetrators and victims and staff victims, the system will actually create a separate slip for each person involved and each combination of people involved. If that will artificially inflate your numbers and you don't want to draw the reports based on having 5 versions of one incident slip, then what you can do is you can change the show dropdown from slip to incident. And then when you click go, for the purposes of any data you draw, it's just going to recombine those slips for you. So you can see there our September went from 17 to just 6 now. And again, if you wanted to see the 6 records that contribute towards that total, you can just click on the bar, and that's going to take you to the records that have contributed towards that overall figure. Okay, and then you can just double click into those to open the slip and read them accordingly. So that's the group report. Like I say, it's a nice general use report that you can use to get quite a lot of data in quite an easy to understand format quite quickly. Behavior Radar works in basically the same way. So a lot of the skills you'll find are fairly transferable between reports. So again, you'll click the filter button and you will just set your overall filters to narrow down the range of data that you want to look at. There we go. And then within this report, you're manipulating the X and Y drop-downs to cross-reference certain sets of data. So what we could do is along our X-axis, set that to day of the week. And along our Y-axis, let's set that to student. So what this report is really good at is letting you highlight where certain ranges of data meet. So are there particular days of the week where individual students have difficulty with their behavior compared to other days of the week in this example? And again, depending on the total number of incidents that are being returned, those blocks within the heat map will go more from yellow to red, with red representing the higher number in the scale. And you'll see there on the right-hand side of the report, you've got a key there just to help you distinguish the different breakdowns for the thresholds. Much like with group report as well, if we click on this 3 for David for Tuesday, that's going to open up the 3 records that contribute towards that overall total for you. So if you do immediately spot an outlier, that lets you jump in and take a look and read more context about why that figure might be being returned. Okay. And again, you can do that for all manner of different things. So you could do that with students versus day of the week. You could do that with students versus the type of incident that are being displayed by each student. You have a print button available to you within here as well. So if you click print, much like with the group report, it's just going to print the report as it displays in front of you now. But with this report, if you export Behavior Radar, this is going to allow you to export it to an Excel spreadsheet, and you'll be given a couple of options. So the first option will be to export it in the grid format as it appears now. So when the data reaches Excel, it will be laid out exactly as it appears in front of you. The other option is to use a list format, and that's just going to give you 3 columns instead of a grid. So again, you've got some flexibility there when it comes to getting the data out of the system. If we jump over to the chronology report now, so this one is less about analyzing data and less about kind of looking at data in a graph format, and more just about having access to all of the records on your system from one place. So this will just show you basically every record that's been filled in on the system according to the filters that you've set. So what you could do here is you could say, I want to search for all records that are not just serious incidents, but all record types. And I might want to do that for the academic year. And then I could narrow that down further if I want to, or I can just click go and keep that nice and general. There we go. And then once you've set your overall filters, then along the top, you can start setting your kind of finer tuned filters. So if we wanted to look for an individual student, we absolutely can do. There we go. And you can also break this down by just looking at on-roll students, off-roll students, new admissions. You can search by student victim as well. And you can also search by daybook ID. So the daybook ID is the unique identifying number for every single slip that you record on your system. So if we scroll to the right-hand side of this page, you'll be able to see the column for daybook ID is here. Some slips you'll see will not have a daybook ID assigned to them yet. They will be blank. That's because the daybook ID doesn't actually generate until midnight every night. So if you save a slip and notice that the daybook ID isn't there yet, just give it that overnight period. And then when you come in the next morning, the system should have assigned a daybook ID for you. And then you would simply type that daybook ID into the box provided if you wanted to search for a record by daybook ID. And again, this just allows you to find all of your individual records for an individual student or of a certain type or for a year group and pull them all up in one place. If you have more than 50 results, regardless of whether you're searching for the top 50 or not, you might find that you have to navigate between pages, and that's what this green arrow here will allow you to do. So it just lets you jump between each page, returning 50 results per page. The only slip types that you might find don't appear in this area are anything that we call letterbox slips. Usually those are reserved for things like safeguarding records. Letterbox slips should only appear within the admin full chronology report. So in the admin area, there is a report much the same as this one. It works in exactly the same way, but it will include those letterboxed slips. So if you've got a safeguarding slip, let's say, and we've worked with you guys to set it up so that anybody can complete those slips, but only users within a certain group can view those slips, then the users in that group will need to use the full chronology report to be able to view and report on that data. So just something to bear in mind. You can then export these results in either a Word document format or an Excel document format, and it will just contain the basic data from within that record for you. Okay. So the last report that we're going to look at today, if we scroll down a little bit further down the page, and you'll see here as we're scrolling, the top section is very much kind of your general multi-purpose use reports that you can use for all manner of different things, and you're probably going to be able to get some good data out of them regardless. As you scroll down further, you're going to get to the more specific use reports for things like reporting on points and prizes, for reporting on things like detentions and exclusions. bullies and victims, and then if you scroll down a little bit further, things like positive handling as well. Again, depending on your particular setup, some of these reports will be more useful than others, so we won't cover those for the time being, but we will just very quickly look at the duration report. So within here then, you'll see earlier we filled in a slip for David, and we specified that that incident took place starting at 5 o'clock and ending at 7 minutes past 5. This report's really good because it's going to allow you to see every single incident that, in this case, David has been involved in, how long those incidents lasted in terms of start time, end time, and duration in hours and minutes. And then what you'll be able to get is a total overall duration for David in this case, for how long as a total of all of their incidents you have spent dealing with David's incident. So in this case, it's just a total of 7 minutes. And then in the bottom right hand corner, just next to the back button, you've got your overall duration, which just collates all of the durations for all of the students on this page. So you can just see as a whole school, how long have you spent dealing with, in this case, serious incidents for students. And when you're filling in your duration widgets, you can use your filters to look at specific things. So it might not always be serious incidents, for example. You might have a quiet room that you use, and you want to keep track of how many minutes each students are spending within that quiet room. Again, the duration widget is a really good tool to use for doing that. And you get all of the same filters available to you within the filter area, as we've already seen with the other reports. So again, once you can filter in one place, you can filter in all places. And you just have some quick filters along the top just to let you quickly access certain bits of information. And then along the bottom, you can export and print the report accordingly as well. Okay. So that's just a quick look at some of the more general reports that you can use on the system in order to analyze the data that you're capturing within BehaviourWatch. What we'll do is, bear me 1 second, there we go. These webinars are actually going to be available monthly for you, and different webinars will contain different information. The next one, looking at the recording and analyzing of bear me 1 second, sorry. Here we go. The recording and analyzing of things like points. So we looked at some of those points reports previously. We're looking at holding that on the 22nd of March, that being the Tuesday, at about 2 p.m. And we'll make information about how to book that next session available as soon as we can for you, just so that you're able to get booked in as soon as possible. If you do want any further in-depth training on any part of the system, it doesn't have to be something that we've covered today, then we do have paid bundles available to you that you can book. You would just need to book that in with my colleague, and they'll be able to give you their address in a moment. Here we go. So that's really it for this session. So if you do have any kind of general questions that haven't been answered during this webinar, and you just need to know a little bit more information about your own system, you can get in touch at support@behaviourwatch.co.uk, and the team will be able to give you a hand with any kind of system specific queries you've got. And if you are interested in booking any of those kind of paid bundles just to get your staff more training on specific areas of the system, then you can book that with my colleague Roberta at roberta@communitybrands.uk. So I hope you found this session useful. Thank you all very much for taking the time to join, and I hope you all have a lovely day.